It began with a whisper, thin as steam rising from morning bread. No one saw where it started. Maybe at the bakery, where Mrs. Dorsey hummed lullabies to her sourdough and the windows fogged with early heat. Or in the barber shop, where old radios hummed softly, and men paused halfway through stories to raise an eyebrow at the sky. "Did you hear?" someone asked, their voice hushed like church pew shadows. "A candidate without lungs. A goldfish." The words slithered through alleyways, over fences, beneath porch swings. One child heard it between bites of toast. Another overheard it from a teenager tapping on a cracked phone screen, scrolling past. Nonsense and landing on Wonder Dot at the elementary school. A 7-year-old named Millie claimed her goldfish leaned forward that morning, not swimming, not floating, but leaning, and whispered, "It's time." Down the street, a retired postman laughed until his tea spilled. "What's next? A hamster police chief?" he chuckled. But he locked his door twice that night, without knowing why, and up at town hall. Amid the hush of ancient clocks and the smell of paper warmed by dust, something peculiar happened. The election drawer, locked tight with brass and boredom, opened, with a brittle creak dot inside, precisely folded and completely official. Lay a candidate registration form, name, Marshmallow Finn, occupation, Goldfish. The section titled Campaign Motto had been left blank. Or maybe, just maybe, it had faded. Some swore later the words had once read, "I remember." People laughed, at first, said it was a prank by some clever teenager or the librarian with too many cats. But the form was signed, dated, stamped. The town clerk, who had worked 3 decades without once misplacing a paperclip, confessed that the seal on the back was authentic. Then who submitted it? Asked the mayor. No answer. Just the shuffle of uncertain shoes on old courthouse floors, outside. The clouds gathered slowly, much slower than usual. Waiting, maybe. And somewhere in a round bowl no one had yet thought to question, a small goldfish turned in place. Once, twice, as though listening, a vote had been cast, or at least a story had begun. By the window of a crooked yellow house on Teabury Lane, a little goldfish made his slow, shimmering turns through the water. His bowl sat nestled between 2 marigolds, where sunlight liked to rest in the early hours of the afternoon. The girl, who owned him, June Tatterley, had placed him there. After reading in a book that goldfish liked to watch the world. June was 11, with a brow that never quite relaxed and a voice that often got lost behind louder ones. She had freckles the color of oatmeal cookies and wore her elbows out on too many cardigans, because all her dreams were the sort you stuffed into sleeves when no one was looking. The goldfish had no castle in his bowl, only a single smooth stone and a bit of stringweed. His name was Marshmallow Finn, because Uni said he was the same color as the melted bits at the bottom of a mug. To anyone else, he was just a fish, a flicker of scales, a trick of light. But to June, he was ... more, a listener, a keeper of secrets, and maybe someday magic. "He doesn't have to say anything," she once told her grandmother. "He just looks at me like he already knows." And her grandmother, who grew quieter each passing season, nodded slowly and said, "Some things don't need to speak to be heard." Marshmallow Finn had been with June since she was 6. Her grandmother had taken her to the fair, where the air smelled of popcorn and sawdust and something sweet you could never quite name. June had won him at a ring toss, but Grandma had chosen the bowl. "A good window fish deserves a good window," she'd whispered every day. As school buses huffed past, and dogtails wagged in rhythm with mail slots. Marshmallow Finn observed the world. He became a witness to birthdays, bicycles, and once, a surprise proposal complete with a dropped cupcake and a tearful yes. Children waved to him each morning, trading secrets and silly faces. An old man doffed his hat every Tuesday. Even the morning doves seemed to trill softer notes when circling near the sill. But mostly, there was June, who told him everything. She told him about spelling tests and the unfair way the gym teacher only picked popular kids to be captains. She whispered about her fear of middle school, about the girl who uninvited her to a skating party, and about Grandma forgetting where she kept the sugar 3 days in a row. Somewhere in those moments, when the sky turned a soft apricot and June's voice got quiet enough to wobble, Marshmallow would wave his tiny fin, just once, like a pinky promise. Then came the day of the broken teacup. It was Grandma's favorite tar, blue and white china piece, with a hairline crack that no one dared mention. It slipped from June's hand while she was dusting, and the sound it made was sharper than thunder. Grandma just blinked, didn't cry, didn't sigh, just said, "Things are only things, love." But later that night, June sat by the window, her knees hugged close to her chest. "Why don't people let me do anything that matters?" she asked the bowl. "I'm tired of decisions being made without me." Marshmallow hovered near the glass. June tilted her head. "I bet you'd be a better mayor than the ones we've had. At least you listen." It was probably just a trick of the light, just water and curve and reflection. But for the tiniest moment, he nodded, and June didn't say a word. She just smiled and leaned closer, placing her forehead gently against the bowl. The water inside shimmered strangely, like it had heard everything she said and was already considering its next move. And outside, the wind picked up a scrap of paper from the sidewalk, a flyer, damp from old rain and torn at the corners, nudged it gently toward the house on Teabury Lane. As the marigolds leaned toward the bowl, and the gold in the sky deepened to bronze, something settled into place. Something quiet, something waiting. And Marshmallow Finn circled once, twice, and then he stilled. It started with crayons. June sat cross-legged on the floor, tongue peeking out in concentration. A large sheet of construction paper lay before her, stubbornly curling at the corners as she layered orange and gold in careful strokes. She wrote the letters in fat, careful caps. "Vote Marshmallow Finn for mayor, honest, fair, never forgets." She clipped the sign to the mailbox outside her house, where the marigolds nodded their approval. Then she made 5 more. One in the library drop box, one on the school's corkboard between lost and found mittens and flute lessons, one tucked behind the cereal display at Grady's grocery. A silent uprising in marker and glue. People snorted. A fish, really. But others paused, looked again, smiled at the bright colors and the strange certain slogan at recess. A boy named Luis made campaign buttons from soda caps and glitter glue. He handed one to June without a word. She wore it, pinned to her backpack like armor. In music class, Clara and Eli wrote a jingle they sang in rounds. Scales and tail, he never fails. Marshmallow Finn, our noble Finn. Soon, other kids joined in. They brought drawings of fish in suits. They made posters with slogans like "More bubble, less trouble, and justice swims here." They drew him on whiteboards and lunch table napkins, with sunglasses and briefcases. The grown-ups, mixed reactions. Some shook their heads and leaned against fences to chuckle. Kids these days, they muttered, but not unkindly. Others found themselves humming the jingle or repeating, "Honest, fair, never forgets," under their breath while folding laundry or waiting in checkout lines. The Goldfish campaign rippled. Beyond the schoolyard, someone started a hashtag. Someone else made t-shirts. A barista at the corner cafe renamed the caramel latte the Finn Special and swirled little goldfish shapes into the foam dot at the town's weekly movie night. A group of teenagers paused the projector before the opening credits. They read aloud a story poem they'd written in scales of gold and ancient glass. The past and future swim and pass. Then came the article. The goldfish and the ballot box ran top left on the local paper. Edith Mayfield, who'd journaled weddings and zoning laws for 23 years, wrote it. The piece was half serious, half seeing, and entirely charmed. She included a quote from a second grader named Molly. "He listens better than the old mayor ever did." The day the article ran, someone slipped a tiny boaty sticker onto marshmallows. Bowl.June found it in the morning, perfectly centered under his chin, as if he were already preparing for a speech at the next town council meeting. Marshmallow's name was mentioned twice, once with a grin, once with a frown, but both times it was met with hushes and glances, like people weren't quite sure if this was silly anymore or sacred. Something gentle had stirred loose, and people felt it. They talked more in line at the pharmacy. They brought extra spoons to bake sales. Even Mr. Pendleton, who hadn't spoken to a neighbor in 7 years, offered a stranger his umbrella during a sudden drizzle. No one said it was because of the goldfish, but somehow everyone knew in the window. On Teebury Lane, Marshmallow Finn swam his patient circles. He did not speak, he did not blink. But June had started keeping a notebook titled Ideas for a Kinder Town, with pages full of doodles and dreams. And every time she wrote something down, Marshmallow paused, just for a breath, as if noting each word, as if preparing his platform. And out past the marigolds, the town leaned a little closer. The leaves fell in lazy spirals that day red gold, a few brave greens still holding their breath in the center of town. The debate stage had been assembled like someone had followed instructions out of a quiet dream. Worn wooden risers, a microphone taped to a broom handle, and 3 folding chairs that creaked with opinion. The contenders stood or sat, in one case beneath the banner fluttering above, Voices of the People, mayoral debate 6 p.m. The people came, reluctantly, at first, then in clusters, then in a hush. Someone brought caramel popcorn. Someone else passed out knitted mittens shaped like fish fins. And at precisely 5:59, Marshmallow Finn arrived, perched in his bowl atop a bright red stool borrowed from the kindergarten reading nook. He glinted like a gold coin caught in a wishing fountain. June carried him gently, placed him center stage, and stepped back. The crowd stared. Phones came out, not loudly, but carefully, like they were capturing something from a bedtime story rather than real life. The other candidates adjusted ties, cleared throats, tried not to stare, failed, and stared anyway. First question from the moderator was something about infrastructure. The first candidate leaned toward the mic and said, "Too much, too fast," like he hadn't heard the question at all. The second candidate smirked and talked about fiscal responsibility and shoe repair, then added a comment that made a few teenagers roll their eyes. Then came the third voice. Technically, it wasn't a voice. just a quiet ripple. Marshmallow Finn swished his tail once and rotated in place, slow and thoughtful. The moderator, a high school English teacher named Mr. Reeves, blinked and then smiled like he'd just remembered a secret. 1.4. Clarity, he said. Some people laughed, but not everyone. Then came the moment no one forgot, the outspoken candidate, the one who always wore suspenders 2 sizes too tight and said books were wasting town funds, leaned forward and asked loudly, "Are we seriously entertaining a bowl of water as leadership material?" He chuckled, a sharp, dry sound. What next? The town flag as police chief. The mic squealed. A child in the front winced, and above them all, the wind stilled. Then, without warning, it rained, just above the man's head. A soft, precise drizzle that lasted 13 seconds. No one else felt a drop. His notes curled, his hair flattened, his smirk vanished. He looked up, dripping and pale, as if the sky itself had offered an opinion. The crowd whispered. Some gasped. Some smiled. Millie, sitting cross-legged in the front, with a juice box and a notebook filled with glitter stickers, whispered, "He protects the stories." The man stepped back from the microphone. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but more softly now even, as he squelched across the stage and disappeared behind curtains that hadn't moved in years. After that, no more questions were posed to Marshmallow, but his silence became impossible to dismiss. That night, the wind returned. It carried scent of fallen apples and something older, library dust, warm ink. Memory. Around midnight, a librarian named Mrs. Adler crept up the steps of Town Hall, a shawl around her shoulders and purpose in her bones. She paused beneath the street lamp, took out her emergency tape, and posted a note on the bowl. 4 words, written in script that looked like it had once been calligraphy. "You've got my vote." By morning, others followed suit. Sticky notes, folded pages, a tag from a tea bag, all tucked beside the water, quiet as crumbs left for something holy. And inside the bowl, Marshmallow Finn turned once, slowly, deliberately, as if every word had weight, as if every silence now held gravity. The day before the election began grey and stayed that way. Clouds stretched low and stubborn over the rooftops, and even the marigolds on Teebury Lane hung their heads. June sat by the window with a blanket around her shoulders. Marshmallows. Bowl shimmered beside her, quiet as always. For hours, she watched him drift from one side to the other. Tail, a golden whisper. Then he stopped, just hovered in the water, slightly tilted, not upside down, not completely still, but different. "Marsh," she whispered, inching closer, no flick of a fin, no attentive glance toward her voice, just floating, soft and off-center, like he'd forgotten how the water carried him. She tapped the glass, a soft sound like a pencil's heartbeat. Nothing, with the bowl clutched tight to her chest. June didn't even pause to put on shoes. She ran through the drizzle, rain soaking her socks and the ends of her sleeves, and pushed through the vet's office door, though the sign read closed. Dr. Ramos came out in slippers, his own mug of tea forgotten on the counter. He took one look, nodded once, and led her back to the exam room without asking questions. He tilted the bowl, shone a light, checked for movement, then looked at June, kind eyes, tired hands. "I'm sorry." June lowered her head. She was 11, almost 12, old enough to pretend she was too old to cry. She cried anyway. Dr. Ramos fetched a tissue box, but said nothing else. He knew, somehow, that anything said aloud would crumple under its own pressure. When June finally stood to leave, she didn't ask for a box or a bag, just carried the bowl back out into the rain and walked slowly home, every drop more silent than the last dot at home. She set the bowl in the usual spot by the window. It looked wrong, too still, too empty even when technically full. Without marshmallows, movement, the water no longer sparkled. It just ... waited that night. June didn't eat dinner, didn't answer when her mum came knocking twice. She sat in the dark, listening to the house creak, to the tick of the old clock, and to a muffled sound coming from the street outside. She opened the curtain. Along the sidewalk in front of Town Hall, lit by the soft gold of street lamps, stood bowls, dozens of them, maybe more, each one filled with water. Some clear, some with marbles or stones at the bottom. Many had small notes tucked against them. A few had candles inside, their flames flickering behind the glass like stars floating low. People had come, quietly and separately, in the early hours after hearing the news. There were no signs, no speeches, just water, just light. Each bowl, a soft echo of his, words spread by accident or instinct. A child's parent texting a neighbor, a librarian gently nudging a frequent visitor, a teenager posting a grainy photo with the caption, "For the one who listened." Even Mr. Pendleton came, gripping a big round vase and a tiny flashlight inside for glow. He placed it down with hands that trembled and lingered. One mother brought her toddler's old plastic fish bath toy, placed it in a cereal bowl, and whispered, "This feels right." When June finally walked to Town Hall the next morning, chilled and still sluggish with sadness, she stopped short. There were more than 30 bowls now, some steaming against the cold air, some reflecting the sky in broken circles. She didn't cry again, not then. She simply stepped forward, took a deep breath, and placed Marshmallow Finn's bowl at the very center. No words, no whispered thank. Used only silence like reverence. People passing by slowed. Some paused, some only stayed long enough to look. But their faces were different, alert, softened, almost expectant. And in that hush, as the water gently recoiled from the bowl's glass edge, some swore they saw it shimmer, not like light breaking, but memory returning. Inside the bowl, though he was gone, Marshmallow Finn remained in story, in silence, in the votes yet to be cast. And June, weary as she felt, sat down cross-legged beside the tribute and whispered the words he'd never spoken aloud. "You mattered." And somehow that made the whole street feel warmer, as if even the rain agreed. The morning of Election Day found the town wrapped in mist, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. The bells of St. Anders rang a little slower than usual, as though unsure what sort of news they'd be asked to deliver. At Teabury Lane, June didn't get out of bed right away. The marigolds outside her window didn't wave, and the glass bowl on her desk sat empty, cleaned and dry. It had been moved from the windowsill. She couldn't stand the silence there anymore. She didn't eat breakfast, didn't bother brushing her hair. Instead, she sat in her pajamas and traced the last ripple she remembered seeing with her finger on the WINDOWSILL dot down the street. The town began to gather. Children wore cardboard badges taped to their shirts. Adults clipped pins shaped like scale patterns to their jackets. Someone painted a goldfish swimming across his pickup door. A little girl dressed up as a bowl. Mrs. Adler, the librarian, set out a book cart next to Town Hall labeled Hope and Wonder, Borrow Freely. She tucked a copy of The Velveteen Rabbit between a book on local governance and a field guide to freshwater fish. No one said it outright, but everyone felt it. The town was quieter today. Not somber, more like reverent. As if they weren't just casting votes, but remembering how to believe in their own goodness. At noon, the lines grew shorter. People trickled away to lunch. Children lingered near the tribute of bowls, some blowing bubbles into the water, others whispering wishes. One boy dipped a finger in and watched the rings echo outward. By 2 o'clock, the last ballot was cast. Upstairs in town hall, the clerk clicked her pen over and over, a sound that felt louder than it should have. She read down the list twice, then once more, ran her finger across the final count. She blinked, called for the records officer. Together, they checked the numbers, then the seal, then the box of write-ins. They'd almost forgotten about those. The clerk stood slowly. Her voice trembled like violin string when she whispered, "It's a tie." Gasps echoed in low waves through the room. At first, no one knew what to do. A tie. It hadn't happened in living memory, and especially not like this. The top candidate, a school board member named Eliza Rue, stood beside the result sheet. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then she smiled quiet and sideways and turned. "I concede," she said. He already won the heart of it, anyway. But the clerk held up a hand. "Wait," she said. "Actually, ... we were thinking, what if..." Both murmurs flickered like fireflies in an attic. A commireship, unheard of, unofficial, unlawful. Well, maybe not unlawful. The town charter had a clause about proportional representation during periods of civic evolution. No one had ever used it, not in 93 years. But it was there. Shared duties. Someone asked. Shared stories. Someone else replied. That evening, as sunset folded the sky into lavender and flame, the town gathered again. They gathered not for a celebration exactly, but something softer. Witnessed 2 chairs sat on the mayor's platform. One, wooden and practical, freshly scrubbed for its newest occupant. Eliza Rue, the other much smaller, was a round pedestal stand, now cleared and scented. Atop it sat Marshmallow Finn's bowl, clean, still waiting. Mrs. Adler brought a small marigold, placed it at the base. Louise, wearing a crown made out of soda caps, approached the microphone and read from his notebook. Gold is not only a color, it is memory and gentleness, and the sound of someone listening without speaking. June didn't step up to the front. She stayed in the crowd, wrapped in her dad's jacket, her sleeves too long and her socks mismatched. But when the final bell rang marking the close of the election, and the first moment of the town's new leadership, she found herself whispering the words again. Barely a breath, "You mattered." And someone nearby whispered the same thing. And then someone else, until the whole square hummed with the words, low and strange, like the current that runs beneath river ice and in the bowl's water. Just for a second, a soft ripple stirred Dot, as though something old or gentle or good was nodding. Years passed. The marigolds still bloomed, and the window on Tilbury Lane still faced east, catching the light like it remembered something. June grew taller. Her elbows wore out fewer cardigans. She started brushing her hair every day though. Never on Sundays. She joined the debate team, then the student council, then, somewhere along the quiet path that leads from girlhood into knowing, she ran for town council. She won. She kept her pin, the tiny fish with a shimmer on the edge in the inside pocket of every jacket she wore. On election day, she touched it 3 times for luck, She never told anyone why. The mayor's office had changed. The old beige walls had been painted a soft green, a color someone once called pond hush. There were new curtains, a community bookshelf, and in the very center, behind the desk where Elisaru still kept paperclips in neat rows, sat a pedestal. On the pedestal was a bowl. It no longer held fish, of course, but it was never empty. Sometimes it held floating tea lights, sometimes lily leaves. Around harvest time, it was filled with tiny notes from children, ideas, wishes, poems. One note read, "A playground for quiet kids." Another said, "Can we put swings by the library?" Every week, Miss Rue would come in early, read the notes aloud, and place them gently into a binder labeled Finn's inbox. When asked, she would smile and say, "We mayors need all the wisdom we can get." Visitors still asked about the bowl. They'd peer inside and then lean back, confused and curious. Is this where it happened? Was he real? Did he actually win staff? Never answered directly. They just pointed to the little plaque beside the bowl. It read, "See, O Mayor, Marshmallow Finn listener, in residence, still deciding." Occasionally, someone would laugh, but more often, they'd pause, tuck their phone away, stand back a little, like they were afraid of disrupting something at the back of the office. Tucked on a shelf behind paints and stamp pads and a large tin labeled Rainy Day Magic, sat June's original campaign sign, faded construction paper, the words still legible, honest, fair, never forgets. Luis ended up running the town's community arts program. He kept a drawer full of glitter glue and called it the Department of Wonder. Mrs. Adler retired, but came back every Thursday for story time. Clara and Eli recorded an album called Songs for Small Heroes. Half the proceeds went to fixing the swings near the library. The town changed, but it also stayed. Kindness threaded through council meetings. Neighbors still brought extras to everything: muffins, gloves, heart, and every so often, when the room went especially quiet and the light hit just so, someone swore they saw it. A flicker, a glint, a memory in motion. The bowl never moved, and yet something about it shifted depending on who approached. A widow once said it showed the garden she'd planted 40 years ago. A shy teen claimed he saw stars rippling across the bottom. One little boy burst into tears and waved back. No one knew what he'd seen, but every person left changed, as if a goldfish had looked them in the eye, nodded once and reminded them that they mattered. And far down the hall, on the mayor's office door, there was a small sign no one was allowed to remove. It read, "Decisions finalized only after consultation. Bowl is acknowledged and heard." They called it tradition, policy, folklore. But those who'd grown up here, those who remembered the morning with the 30 bowls and the rhythm of a silence that healed, they called it something simpler. Respect. They knew what water could hold. Marshmallow Finn never needed words, or votes, or even lungs. He only needed someone to listen, which, in the end, may be the real job of every leader. And somewhere, swimming still in the hearts of those who believed, he does. There are stories we leave on shelves, and stories that wait beside bowls. This one never ended. Exactly, it softened, like fog weaving through empty streets, like the hush after a lullaby. At town hall, late at night, when even the clocks seem sleepy and the echo of footsteps no longer lingers, something remains. The janitors know. They pass over the floor with quiet brooms and supermarket mops, and sometimes glance at the pedestal where the bowl sits. It doesn't always catch the light the same way. Some nights, it's nearly invisible, as if turned inward. Other times, they swear it glows not bright, not loud, but like breath on frosted glass, like memory remembering itself. One janitor, Mr. Haynes, says he saw a shadow, just a flicker, just once, a fin, maybe, a ripple without cause. He didn't talk about it for weeks. Then, while folding towels in the break room, he whispered, it looked like it was swimming backward, into something I'd forgotten. Another worker, Rittertal kind, quiet sat beside the bowl once, after her mother passed away. She said she didn't cry, just sat, just watched. And in the still water, for no more than a blink, she said she saw her mother's kitchen window, with her in it, humming dot. The mayor doesn't comment on these things. Miss Rue, older now, with laugh lines around her eyes and half spectacles balanced on her nose, simply nods when asked. He listens, she says. He always did. Councilwoman June visits too, though rarely during meetings. She comes in the off hours, when rain is tapping at the windows or the fog leans in like it wants to borrow something. She brings one marigold, never more, places it gently at the bowl's base. No words, no speeches, just stillness like tradition, like prayer. And sometimes she whispers, look what you made room for. And other times, thank you for teaching silence how to speak. She never stays long. Just enough, and out in the town, under lamplight and over coffee cups, people trade stories. About the day it rained on just one man. About the boaty sticker that never peeled off. About the sound a bowl makes when it holds more than water. Children ask, did he really win? Adults smile and say, winning looks different here. And sometimes, when kids ask how a fish could tell people what to do, the answer is always, he didn't. And also, he did. Because maybe that's what matters. Not who speaks the loudest, but who listens when no one else will. Not what gets passed into law, but what lingers behind people's eyes while they choose it. The bowl remains, sometimes empty, sometimes full of folded stars or ink-smudged wishes. And once only once it filled with rainwater, though no one remembered. A storm. Visitors come and go. Notes keep arriving, some in handwriting so small it must have taken a magnifying glass, some written in crayon, some with pressed flowers tucked inside, and every so often someone stays a minute longer than intended, watches the bowl, thinks. They see something shimmer, a ripple, a suggestion, a vote that was never about change on paper but about believing, even just for a moment, in something soft, because maybe, just maybe, that's how good stories end, not with a bang, but a bubble, not with applause, but water hushed around a memory, not with yes, but with yes, ... Still.